Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 3 uses of tactics. So this is going to be an instructional video that is going to hopefully answer some questions if you're having trouble translating tactics into your actual games. So this is just a text version of what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm pretty much just going to read it, but then we're going to look at some examples. So there's going to be a video form in case people want to listen or watch, but also this in case people want to read. So start with the definition of tactics. So the sequence of forcing moves. And the forcing moves are checks, captures, or threats. And threats are just a move that will threaten to check or capture, basically, that result in checkmate, material gain, or forcing a draw. Okay? There might be other different definitions, but this is just kind of what makes the most sense to me in general. So it's easy to understand, and that's all you really need to know. So many people are familiar with the idea of solving tactics puzzles to improve their chess. However, some chess players are confused on why it's not always providing the expected results. So some people might say tactics puzzles are easier because you know the tactic is there. In a real game, nobody tells you there is a tactic. I've read this many times on Reddit and other chess forums, all since I've been playing chess. So if this quote resonates with you, hopefully I can provide some answers here on what to do about it. So in my opinion, the main reason that people feel a disconnect between their tactical training and their actual games is due to not understanding how tactics fit into a good thought process. Rarely do people tell you how to solve tactics and what you should be thinking about, as well as how it fits into a practical game. And then some of the common advice you might hear is to just do tactics and stop blundering, and you can get to 1000, 1500, or 2000. Another advice you might hear is learn basic tactical patterns and be able to recognize them instantly, or do fewer chess tactics but spend more time on them and improve your calculation. And usually I only hear one of these pieces of advice given by one specific person, but in reality, all of them are true to some extent. The problem with the first quote is that it just says do tactics, you'll improve. This will work for people, especially if they work hard at it, but it doesn't specify if they should be trying to go fast, slow, or both, or even like the checks, captures, and threats, forcing moves tips. Okay, and then the second quote is about learning to spot basic tactics patterns quickly, useful for blitz and generating candidate moves, which this does is useful for classical as well, um, mainly because of the candidate moves. Because if you can identify good candidate moves quickly in classical, then you're gonna be able to get to the heart of the problem much quicker and spend less energy calculating a lot of irrelevant stuff. So the third quote that helps with rapid and classical by focus on accuracy rather than speed. It also improves your visualization skills, so being able to like see 3 or 4 moves ahead and keep the position clear in your mind and still be able to figure out, okay, what can my opponent do, what's a legal move, and so on. Ideally, you want to do both of these types of training. So like these two, like doing fast tactics to be able to solve them instantly, like Puzzle Rush, and doing slower tactics so that you get enough time to improve your calculation. Which, when you're doing calculation tactics, that kind of skill is not being tested as much in Blitz or Bullet at all. It's really only in Rapid and more so in Classical that this calculation is a thing. So if you're someone that only plays Blitz, then there's a good chance that your visualization and general calculation is really lagging behind. Okay, so where was I? So ideally you do both, but people usually push you in one direction or another. Your personal style is in part determined by what you prefer between the two types of practice. It's fine to have one preference, but if your progress ever stalls, it usually helps to pay a bit more attention to the one you dislike the most, which is usually under practice. So basically, it means just cover your weaknesses. If you only do fast tactics and you're frustrated with how you're progressing, then switch it up with doing more slow tactics instead of fast tactics. But ideally, like try to divide your time between both. Like maybe if you had 1 hour a day for tactics, you could split it in half like Puzzle Rush style, try to be fast, learn patterns, then half do like a certain number of puzzles, but spend like 3 minutes each per puzzle trying to make sure you're getting it correct and seeing the whole solution. Or even 3 puzzles at 10 minutes each. Like, you can go kind of overboard with it. I wouldn't go much more over than 10 to 15 minutes though. But you might read like some Kotal book where they say 30 minutes is like a thing that like some previous Russian grandmaster used. Okay, so that's fine and all, but even after sorting out the typical tactical advice, we still haven't looked at the earlier typical complaint of having trouble knowing when to apply tactics to your games or how it fits into a typical thought process. Okay, we've been going 5 minutes. So let's return to the original quote that we want to answer. Tactics puzzles are much easier because you know a tactic is there. In a real game, nobody tells you there is a tactic. So the answer to this quote, in my view, is that nobody should have to tell you there is a tactic or not, because you should be looking for tactics in 3 different situations on every single move. Heavy emphasis on this point. This is like the most important point of today. Is that on every move, there are 3 different situations which I feel is important to check for tactics. So if you're saying that in a normal game, in a tactical puzzle, you know there's a tactic. In a game, you don't know. The thing is, it doesn't matter because even if you don't know, you should be looking for a tactic, even if you don't think there could be one there. And that's the way that you counter like this phenomenon. So every move that's not your opening prep or end game, so you know the exact moves too. Because if you know this move is definitely what you do and it's safe, you can just play it. But usually be on opening prep that you memorized and exact end games, like the very end of some like king and pawn ending where you know exactly what to do. You don't have to do like a blunder check that much. So the 3 key uses of tactics are seeing tactics for your opponent, seeing tactics for yourself, and preventing blunders. Now the first one and the last one are kind of similar. Sometimes it's the exact same thing, but we will see a game that has an example of all 3 of these, and it will highlight the difference between all of them. As I said, this is best explained with some examples. I will add the examples to this article, and at some point I'll add this article to the description. This is kind of like a new Notion website that I'm using to store my notes, and it'll be available to everyone, and you'll be able to search them. If you want, you can actually just type in the URL and find my other notes that aren't released yet, but I'm aware of what's published and not. But at some point, you'll be able to see all this in the description. So now let's get on to the examples. Remember, there are going to be 3 key tactics, 3 key uses that we're looking for. Okay, got if I want to make this a 10-minute video, I have 2 minutes. Probably go a little bit over, but hopefully not 15 to 20. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through to the critical moments for this video. But in general, like I would say, even at this point, okay, you're going to make Queen f6. You should be looking for what forcing moves your opponent has before you do that. But anyway, let's get to move 15 as the point. Okay, so they play knight f5, and we're taking the black perspective here. This is the person who lost. So black took the knight on f5. White recaptures with the pawn. Now, I want you to pause the video and think about what you would do in this position. And actually, I need to hide the moves. So hopefully you didn't cheat. But it's okay if you did. Okay, hopefully you had enough time to think. And if you saw that this was a free pawn, could take with the bishop, then congrats. So this is the first use of tactics, that is seeing tactics for yourself. Well, not in the order that I put it, but it's one of them. But it's the first one that appeared in this game, is that you have a tactic for yourself. You can just take the pawn. Now, black did not take the pawn. They moved the knight and put more pressure on it, but that doesn't really help you. So let's look at the engine analysis for this. So we see bishop takes f5 is the best move, just taking the pawn. But when they go knight e7, the valuation drops. Actually, I think a lot of you guys would probably like seeing the evaluation bar. So it's like that, and then you make the knight move. You can see you're losing a lot of your advantage that you had. It's still better for black, but you definitely should just take the pawn. Like it was a free pawn, no reason not to take it. Okay. Um, so next, they move the bishop out the way. Let me refresh because when you go to Nouse's board, it makes the colors a little bit weird. So they went knight here. Bishop goes back. And then bishop takes f5, h3. Okay, now this is the next point I want to bring to your attention. So again, pause the video and think about what you would do as black here and why. Okay, hopefully you had enough time. So the main thing you want to do whenever your opponent makes a move is you want to see what would they do if it was their turn to move again. So seeing tactics for your opponent is the first thing you want to do on every single move. And you start by looking at the forcing moves, because those are just going to be more like if you make a quiet move, there's so many options you can do. A forcing move narrows the tree of possible good moves in such a way that it just makes sense to calculate them. So first, like you might look for the checks. There's this check, and I don't see any other checks. In terms of captures, there's this capture, there's this capture, and there's this capture. Now in terms of threats, those are harder to see all of them perfectly. And it turns out none of these checks or captures are going to be it. Like the bishop going to c6 isn't going to work because the pawn could just take. This bishop going here isn't going to work because you can probably just take with the rook maybe. This doesn't make sense because you can just take with that rook. So a lot of these moves don't make sense, but there is an important threat in this situation. A move that threatens a check or a capture. And the hint is that they moved h3, so they're threatening this move to fork the rook and the bishop, and it's protected by the pawn. So before white moved h3, this move was a threat, but it wasn't a big deal because you could just take with the bishop. When they move h3, now all of a sudden, this becomes a very real threat. And if you start by looking at what your opponent can do against you as the first thing that you do, rather than look for your own plans, then you'll notice, oh wait, no matter what I do, I have to make sure I'm prepared to handle them moving g4. So this is a very classic mistake that so many players under 2,000 make all the time. I probably make this mistake a lot too, and I'm over 2,000 online. So this is very, very, very important. And it's a thing that you need to check on every single move, or else you'll just blunder a lot. You'll wonder, why can you do tactics and not find them in your games? And this is another interesting point about it, because this is not really like your typical puzzles where you're doing puzzles on your side. You have to like do the reverse. Like if you were to do a puzzle and flip the board, that's kind of what you have to do to be able to see these types of things. So you're basically pretending you're your opponent and then solving tactics puzzles for them. So hopefully this kind of makes some sense for why you want to start by looking at your opponent's threats. So you need to do something about this. Now black castled. So they fell right into this blunder. And again, this idea of checking for the forcing moves, three different scenarios on every single move, we've covered 2 of them. This will cut down on a lot of your blunders if you can do this consistently. This is the main thing that I think that would take anyone up to 1500 as quickly as possible without studying too many other things. Like a lot of specific knowledge, it doesn't really matter nearly as much, because you can get the best position for 40 moves and then you make a blunder like this and then you can't win the game. So this is definitely the most important thing that you can do to improve your chess, is to get good at this kind of thinking process. and to practice doing it every single move. This is much easier to do in Rapid and Classical than in Blitz. In Blitz, you're always going to have to abridge your thought process in some way. But I definitely recommend practicing this on Rapid to really try to identify all of your opponent's forcing moves, no matter how crazy they appear. You just have to look at them because there could always be a follow-up that ends up being really interesting that you have to consider. So again, I'll just go back to the first situation. So they move this pawn here, and you could just take. So that was the first one, just tactics for yourself. The other case, on every single move, whenever they make a move, you need to be aware of what they could do if they were to move again. So if I played h3, if they were to move again, they're moving g4. Okay, now, but what's the last one? Let's see. Preventing blunders. Now, this one is kind of interesting because when you castle, the blunder check is to visualize the move you want to make and then think about what your opponent wants to do. It's very similar to starting with looking at what your opponent wants to do, but the difference is when you start by looking at what your opponent has in terms of tactics, you're using it to narrow your search in case they have something very important to deal with. For your blunder check, it's not, this time it is the exact same process, but it's not always the case, and we'll see that in a better example. Let me see, what move is it? It's going to be move 20. Okay, so rook takes, and now, okay, so now black to move, and they want to go knight d5. So pause the video and see what's wrong with knight d5. Okay, so the problem with knight d5, hopefully you saw it, is that this bishop can just take it for free. You have no way of recapturing it, and you just lose the knight. And keep in mind, this is a rapid game. So, oh, actually, now I'm looking at the time, they spent 1 second to do this. So clearly they did not do a blunder check. Most likely what happened was they took the rook, thought their rook was going to retake, and then the square would be available for the knight because the rook is gone. But it turns out the bishop is here. Also, when they take with the rook, the bishop could also take with the rook, and then they have 2 pieces that they have a choice to recapture the knight with. So black played very quickly, 1 second, and made a horrible blunder because they did not blunder check. And again, the blunder check means, okay, you want to go knight e5, cool. You want to get the knight in the center, do some stuff, maybe try to trade off the knight for the bishop. I don't know. You're down material, you don't want to do that, but maybe you want to. The problem with that is when you say, okay, I want to go knight e5, you have to do the third check of tactics in a position and see, okay, I'll go here. What checks, capture, and threats does my opponent have against me? There's no checks that I see, because again, the knight is blocking that check, but they can capture the knight. So, and then if you see that, and it's like, oh wait, I can't go here. Maybe I'll go knight c6 instead, which it may or may not be a better move. That actually, this move also kind of makes some sense because then you can get to this outpost square, but that's beyond this video. Or just push here. Kind of worried about infiltrating and attacking that pawn now at some point. But the point is, you don't want to just give up your knight for free. Do a blunder check, it'll save you. So we've just seen examples of seeing tactics for your opponent, which you do at the start of every move. Look for their forcing moves. Tactics for yourself. If you decide your opponent doesn't have anything against you, just look for tactics to see if you can win anything for free. And preventing blunders. No matter what, before committing to your move, try to visualize it because it will change something about the position, and that something can cause a major blunder, as we saw in this situation. So let's see, how long have I been going? Okay, 19 minutes, so under 20, nice. So hopefully you took something away from this. I will add some of these examples to this, and at some point it will be added to the description. It might not be added within the first week of this video going up. But hopefully this answered the question of how tactics translate into your real games, because you should be looking for them all the time on every single move, basically. And the more you practice this thought process, the faster you will improve at chess. Because almost every game under 1500 that I look at is just filled with these kind of blunders that could be avoided by doing this blunder check. And you need to take your time in order to do this correctly, because you saw they just moved a knight in 1 second and blundered. If you're playing too fast and you're making blunders, this is the only thing that's gonna stop you. Not just doing more tactics, it's gonna be changing your thought process to apply your tactics in a better way.